okay, I need to be as good, if not better than. And that kind of stayed with me. Imagine, I mean, there were no books that you could learn from. There was two expensive books, and the cost of the book used to be more than 3 months' salary. There was no internet and Google Auntie and everything else at that time. So the only thing was to try and figure out. A few people said, that's a kind of idol for the moment. This is what that person does better than me, or is, that's why he's where it is. So how much can I glean from that person? How much can I learn in terms of how you walk, how you talk, how you present, what is the skill that you're good at, how do you get other skills? I made a little caricature of myself with styrofoam. I gave them some dots and said, red dots mean you've got something negative to say that you want me to improve because we're not getting anywhere. And green dots are if you want to say something nice. Finally realized that from all their critique, it was each person had a different way of how they wanted me to interact with them.
What's really standing out for me is that curious learner, the observer, courageous, vulnerable person who's willing to put himself out there to make mistakes, to learn from everybody. Attributes of an effective leader who's saying, I want to become one of you and collectively work rather than stand apart and do it. Zeal to keep on peeling the onion in yourself and learning more and more about yourself. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Happiness Hour for Leaders. Today, I have with me a friend who I've known for a couple of decades now, Rattan Keswani. Rattan has worked in the hospitality industry for over 4 decades as Deputy Managing Director of Lemon Tree Hotels, co-promoter and director of Carnation Hotels, and the longest stint he's had is as president and at the Oberoi and Trident hotels in India and overseas. He has been sharing his experience and learnings as a trainer, advisor, and mentor with many senior executives as well as university in India and East Africa. He has authored a book, Check In, Never Check Out, an episodic journey of his professional experiences and learnings. And that's really how I experienced him when we had a long stay at the Oberoi and he was the president. He never checked out. He was always available and as a friend and as it was a home away from home for us. So thank you, Rattan, for joining me today.
Pleasure's mine.
I was looking back at our association and thinking, let's take back a step even further back. And what made you decide to take up hospitality as a career when it wasn't one of the most popular careers in India? We had some very stereotypical careers, but hospitality was not one of them.
Yeah, so it was never part of the beat. It was never part of the proposed selection in any form. I've written a bit about it in my book. The obvious choices when you're growing up from the family is, you must become a doctor, you must become an engineer. That wasn't happening. The marks weren't just good enough even at that time, though it was a good 75 percentile kind of a place, but it wasn't enough to get me into, and I wasn't interested in medicine anyways. Engineering, I did give the exam, but my percentages were 75 and I wasn't going to get into any university. Which meant that the other choice was to try and graduate in commerce. That gripped my attention. I did very well. I was part of the DAV college in Chandigarh. My father used to be based there at that time for a short part of my graduation period. Before that, I was doing my schooling there after Delhi. And as he moved on to Lucknow, graduation was coming to an end and the choices were what to do next. And so the conversation began on wanting to do an MBA. I had some brilliant friends and associates of mine who I used to play tennis with. They were all trying to do their preparation for the entrance exams for the MBA. I kind of pitched in too. We used to kind of study together, play together. And once I'd gone home and, we were discussing what next, and I said, I'd like to do an MBA. He used to work for Grief Scotland at that time, which is anyway, kind of a MNC, FMCG in its own form. And he said, nonsense. You'll sell soaps and fans, because at that time, the companies that kind of recruited management trainees after the MBA or whatever were the famous or infamous DCM and very little of Hindustan Lever, kind of taking this principle on. And so DCM and therefore Soaps and Fans and Godrej Boys were the companies that time. And he was part of that same industry in terms of distribution, though it was heavy engineering equipments that he was involved with Reeves Cotton. So he said, no, that's not a choice you have. So that left me with not very much else. And he knew somebody who knew a chartered accountant in Lucknow. So he said, CA is the next choice. So I started to do an articleship and started to prepare for my inter exams of CA, which I kind of did the first two exam sets. Okay, I was working as an intern with the CA, fairly average firm, but I used to do government banks. So sit in the boondocks of the basements, all dusty, working with the PM who didn't want to pick up any files. So almost like working with the perennial pencil on the ear. Wasn't very exciting. So the same chartered accountant, he was the internal auditor and chartered accountant for the JP Group at that time. It was a consolidated, remember, and they used to do audits of dams, the famous Kudremukh Dam, and those ones. So I was appointed into that assignment for their annual results, which meant I had to come to Delhi to Vasant Vihar, where the office was. And at the same time, JP Group was coming up with two hotels. So I was given the assignment to audit the pre-opening project expenses, etc. And one hotel that was coming up was in Vasant Vihar, which is where their office was. And the other one was further down into North Delhi, which was in Rajendra Place. Both were called JP, which gave me a bit of whether that was a boo-in, if you may call it, otherwise, though it was just, it was a skeleton, it was being built. But I didn't know that this would be a precursor for the world of tomorrow. Wasn't very interesting. Doing those exams was very draining, and wasn't the choices that I want to make. And by which time I had missed all the early exams for the MBAs, the typical IIMs, etc. And then out of the blue, he used to respect the MD of the company very much as his mentor. And he brought me this advertisement from Hindustan Times. And he said, his MP's name was Govind Mathani. And he said, Mr. Mathani says, this is the choice of tomorrow. The world is hospitality. And, this is going to be the great, world. And tell your son to apply. So this was the advertisement for at that time, OCLD was called OSHM, or the Oberoi School of Hotel Management, as a 2-year program as a management trainee. So he said, apply in this. So said, well, what's this all about? Knew nothing about hotels, hospitality. At best, I think my father had taken my mother and I to one restaurant in Chandigarh. There used to be an Oberoi in Chandigarh in those days, and one restaurant in Clark's Hotel in Lucknow. So very close to our home. But that was our total exposure. So I said, okay. I then was reading the paper and I realized that the Bajaj Institute of Management in Mumbai was holding an entrance exam. And one of the choices for the first entrance exam for Oberoi Hotels was Mumbai. And the dates kind of were following up simultaneously. My cousins used to live in Mumbai. He was very proud of their achievements, as most parents are. They're proud of all the other people's achievements and, cousins and stuff like that. So, he fixed up that I would stay with them, his uncle's kids. So I called them up and I said, look, I'm going to come and stay with you. They had done MBAs and they had flopped the Oberoi final exam, both of them. So I said, I'm coming for this Oberoi exam, but I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit. And, the next day is a Bajaj exam. So I'm going to do it. But don't tell dad because I'm going to come for 2-3 days. So they, kind of accepted that choice and, kept it confidential. So I gave my first test and exam and interview at then the Oberoi Towers, now Trident in Mumbai. And that episode covers it as my, the second or third chapter in my book. And so, this process of Oberoi interviews, group discussions, exams, there are about almost 9 of them in a series that happened.
Okay.
The first one was in Mumbai, and the other ones followed up in Delhi. My grandparents used to stay in Delhi, so I used to go for those exams and, the tests over, I think it was a couple of months at the end of the year. And in the meantime, I'd given this Bajaj exam and kind of forgotten about it. Had a good, one day partying with my cousins to whatever extent party was possible at that time, the way we. And so, I think end of December, early January, the exams for Oberoi hotels. And I'd forgotten about the Bajaj piece because, nothing happened. And, the song Postman Rings the Bell Twice, once, or whatever. My dad used to come for exactly an hour for lunch because office was very close by. We used to have a lovely house. And, he'd kind of take a little snooze for 15, 20 minutes and then go. So which meant he would come 1 1/4 past 1, be gone by 1/4 past 2. Fortune obviously written somewhere else. But on that fateful day, he fell asleep and didn't get up till the bell rang. And the bell rang at about 1/4 past 3. I used to have a room in the loft. My mom was sleeping. And so he scrambled out of the room, which was the guest room downstairs, and opened the door. And there was a postman. In those days, mail were not there. And he was carrying 2 telegrams. And one was, and so he opened both the telegrams. Always worry people. He
Yes.
opened both the telegrams, and each of the telegrams said I had been selected for Bajaj, and one said I'd been selected for the Oberoi hotels. And he threw a fit that I cannot even relate to today, because he was really angry. There was, kind of fire coming out of his ears and mouth, whatever. And he tore the Bajaj telegram. He says, I had told you not to do this, and you're not going to, whatever. Oberoi hotels it is. In the meantime, I was working as a chartered accountant, that chartered accountant. And so Oberoi hotels it was. And so I did my internship, and I did a couple of the 3 levels of the first part of the CA exams, and then joined Oberoi hotels in August of 81, not knowing anything about that world. It was quite a daunting world when you walked in there. So that was the insertion into hospitality. Never knew it would, go on for 4.5 decades, whether it be good or bad or whatever. Yeah,
So
that's
more
how
like,
it all began.
so it's more like kicked in, never kicked out.
Yeah, kind of. I think so. Yeah. The fear always was, would I get kicked out from the very beginning? But no, it didn't happen. So almost did during the program, but that's another story. So
Yeah, but I mean, it's of course been a fantastic, you've had an incredible journey. Yes,
yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
you've had your ups and downs like any other leader, but I think for one thing, always stood out for me was a person who was approachable, accessible, and in the forefront. You led by example, you led from the front, never sitting in the corner office and just, letting everybody just do their work. You were there.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. So
Uh,
means a lot.
no, seriously, Ratan, I haven't come across many general managers. You walk into a hotel, you pretty much have to search for them, and after you search for them, they still do not peep out easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't take,
Unfortunately true in a lot of cases. Yeah.
yeah, they don't take that ownership of saying it's my hotel. It's not just a hotel, it's my hotel. And for you, the hotel was as much an extension of your home, and you brought that out there. Uh, it what was your core ingredient that made you operate like that?
What how should I put it? One, because I didn't know anything about the world, and if you read the episode about my first few months at the Oberoi school at that time, I almost got flunked because I wrote something very stupid in my food and beverage exam because I knew nothing about these ingredients and stuff. I never seen them, and so I kind of guessed my way that one looked like the other, and I was an object of derision for some time, and thankfully the dean that time kind of understood my background and therefore let me stay. And then I promised him that I would top the program, and I did. But it was the desire to say, I'm going to put in my best to try and be better than the others. I mean, you can only compare with somebody. And then let's give it a big shot. I mean, know nothing about the world. You come from a different family background. It's not in the luxury or the other kind of spaces. People who are there from foreign services are normally at that time in OSHM, or they were from the armed forces, the senior brigadiers and generals family. So you came from a different environment, and you kind of said, okay, I need to be as good, if not better than, and that kind of stayed with me. Imagine, I mean, there were no books that you could learn from. There was two expensive books, and the cost of the book used to be more than 3 months' salary or
Oh,
stipend, rather.
wow. Okay.
And nobody wanted to give their books. The chefs or the people who had them never want to give them to you. So you got to peek in, break into their offices and, try and read something. There was no internet and Google Auntie and everything else at that time. So you didn't have any access to. So the only thing was to try and figure out. A few people said, that's a kind of idol for the moment. This is what that person does better than me, or is, that's why he's where it is. So how much can I glean from that person? How much can I learn in terms of how you walk, how you talk, how you present, what is the skill that you're good at, how do you get other skills? So in the initial part, I worked with a couple of very good people, and I mentioned them in the book, and one of them launched the book in Bombay, which is Rajiv Kaul. He was my first boss many, many years ago. He put me through a pushy kind of a thing to make sure that I knew what I was doing and I would do better. And I used to finally tell him, he said, why do you work so many hours? I said, I take work from you because I want to, make sure that I take your chair, whether I take it by force or otherwise, but like your chair. And that was my whole thinking process. And he and I talk about it till still. So the idea was in a bit of an alien world at the beginning to try and immerse yourself in that world. And I'm normally a fairly introspective kind of a person. I make a few friends and I'm good with them. But I started to enjoy, engaging with different sets of people who were team members. And a lot of the team members, when I was a management trainee, who were senior teams, they were supervisors of different departments, taught me things that they did wrong, but just to teach me for fun. सिर्फ आप बाद में आके हमें पकड़ लेना अभी आप सीख लीजिए हम क्या क्या करते हैं. Very, very, very nice of them. I'm still close to a few of them, by the way. They're on Facebook with me. I meet them once in a while. And so that engagement, different, so particularly we started off in Delhi. And then, after that, Mumbai as a professional piece. There were different ages. They came from different backgrounds, right? They were not natural hoteliers, true, because they came from all kinds of backgrounds. But to kind of co-join with them and find enjoyment in that interaction and to be able to, without shouting, screaming, putting your designation into it, to be able to engage with them and make them do what I thought was better for them to do was very exhilarating. And to speak their language and to be able to get to know what they do deeper, to be able to be insidious in knowing what their things were. And of course, you started to enjoy the variables with guests. At that time in Mumbai, large component of Japanese customers, large component of other nationalities, very few Indians at that time. Indians didn't travel so much, barring the very, very senior CEOs. And so just a simple thing, the pronunciations and the way you spoke English changed as you dealt with customers. So you spoke to Japanese in a different kind of broken English so that they understood. An Englishman or an English lady was with you and you suddenly slipped into certain Oxfordian pronunciations. Same thing would happen if you would, so it was an enjoyment. It was an enjoyment of learning. I had a very good set of people at the front desk. They looked after me in the sense of teaching me the innards of the actual relevant game. The other one, that was very, very theoretical. And that's remained with me all my life. And I've spoken about it in all the episodes, that a lot of whatever changed in me, whatever I became better at, whatever pushed me towards learning something, a lot of times was driven by the commentary from the team member, a subordinate, a questioning from them, an advice from them. Maybe I did. Some people say I get too close with people in terms of the team members and the other people who work with me. But maybe because I gave them the opportunity to reach out to me and chat with me whenever you wanted to, at their time, not my time, they did speak up. And then, when my book talks about multiple crises, but even when I was a young manager in Mumbai, went through a lot of stuff. I mean, cars would blow up and catch fire, the lobby of the overhead cars porch, elevators would stop, water would stop, and then you had nobody to reach out to. But the senior team members were there. and say, let's do it together. Let's get the hotel back into shape and get the guests safe and everything else. And so they were there, and that confidence being built up with everybody. But they made me make a lot of changes in the way I spoke, in the way I dealt with people, in how I gave feedback to them, how I appraised them. Did I give them freedom to do better? Trying to kind of create magic. It came in bits and pieces, and I kept improving over a period. I think so. The other they would be able to say if that happened or not, because some of them know me for a long time. But that was an excitement, and so I got very immersed in the team experience and the guest experience, and from both I was seeing things differently. Imagine speaking to MD of a company who's waiting for an appointment with the banker or the SEBI person, or whatever, and he looks troubled. And because you go greet him, have a little chat with him, he asks you to sit down and shares his woes. And you realize it's human. These guys are human. They're not gods. You put everybody into a kind of a pedestal, as people do when you grow as well. And to see and learn from them and what they would say about their organizations and what they learned with people and how to do things was very rewarding. So that kind of in every place. And for some reason, and I don't have any reason why that happened, I was moving almost short of every 2 years, which is a pain for the family. And as the kids were growing up and kids were there, but it exposed me to multiple cultures, multiple nationalities, their own way of thinking. Theory teaches you must do things equally and fairly, but no, the same shoe does not fit all. And I talk about in my book saying this is what you're taught to be and how to be fair, but all that you're taught is rubbish. Because the way that people think you would be fair to them is very personal.
Yeah.
They take feedback differently. They want the environment of feedback to be given differently, the language to be given differently. I talk about an experience in one hotel where things weren't working out. I made a little caricature of myself with styrofoam. I gave them some darts and said, red darts mean you've got something negative to say that you want me to improve because we're not getting anywhere. And green darts are if you want to say something nice, and it's okay if you don't. And they did. We spent 3-4 hours doing this exercise. And finally realized that from all their critique, it was each person had a different way of how they wanted me to interact with them. There were very few similarities in 11 departmental heads. So that was kind of a shocker to say, oh, now how am I going to remember this nonsense? So I made laminated cards of each person. And if I called them for a meeting, I would put that laminated card to say, Anshu said this, and this is what she likes, this is how she prefers it. And I slipped that laminated card under my glass, on the table. And I'd kind of look at it, say, before you would come, I kind of said, don't do this. She doesn't like it. It sparks off negativity. So start this way because, that's what the person has said. And I had these laminated cards for all 11 people. Maybe that worked. Maybe just the sensitivity of, how we were dealing with each other came as an improvement. And there are many such occasions that I've talked about. So yeah, that means that changed your way of working. That changed your way of managing people. I won't say leadership, but managing people. And if it made a difference positively, then I said, okay, that's the new way, because this is the way you needed to deal. So there are older people, all kinds of stuff, right? There are multiple subordinates or peers that you're responsible for, who are older than you, much more experienced than you in their vertical. How do you draw them to help you out? The only way you do it is by finding something that their needs are, and then figuring out how to help them with that need so that they became a little bit more bonded, saying, he's always there to help me or to be a sounding board, so let me help him. Because everybody's got egos. And at one point of time when I came to corporate office, every one of the EVPs had been my senior or was my senior before. And suddenly they had a bit of a dotted reporting line, not very easy to handle. And they'd been senior to me about a decade.
Okay.
It was not 2 or 3 years, right? So, how do you draw those people in? So each one of those things, I think, was a constant learning curve. Yeah, so that's really what got me going, and I enjoyed that. But same thing with guests.
Mm.
Ages are different, language is different, and plus you see some very good things and you see some not so very good things, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I've
it's a
seen suicides, I've seen people being, knifed in front of me or in the hotel. I've seen terrorist violence in Sri Lanka. I've been part of 26/11. And I've also been part of very interesting, positive interactions with, multiple celebrities, business heads, whatever. And each one is a chapter of observation learning. And as much as I've been able to glean and keep as a menu in my head, it's helped. It's helped me. I hope the other people think so too. So that's where it is.
So what's really standing out for me is that curious learner, the observer, the courageous, vulnerable person who's willing to put himself out there to make mistakes, to learn from everybody. All really attributes of an effective leader who's saying, I want to become one of you and collectively work rather than stand apart and do it. Uh, so, and of course, there's that whole zeal to keep on peeling the onion in yourself and learning
Yeah.
more and more about yourself. That, of course, trumps everything. It's like, okay, what new about me can I learn through this? Really, so thank you so much for sharing, your how you've grown into the person you are today. But the thing you really mentioned, which touches the next chord, is the crisis. Whether it was the knifing or the bombing in Sri Lanka or in the Trident Oberoi, which was really a very horrific incident for the city at that time and the country. Um, what helped you? I get it's the team always, but end of the day, when you're at the helm of the team, how much ever you've been prepared, this is not anybody's ever prepared for. What helped you get through those days, and how did you change as a person through that episode?
Well, there have been multiple episodes. So the initial ones were when I was a young assistant manager. And so if you read the book in detail, it takes you through each one of them actually. Um, there were things that happened and nobody had taught you what to do. What do you know when water breaches all over the hotel, the basement gets flooded, elevators stop, electricity not working. Those are not the days of mobile phones. Phones are not working because raining cats and dogs in Mumbai. You have no one to reach out to say, what do I do? And so you got to figure it out yourself. In the meantime, the hotel's full. There are people still wanting to check in and check out. Uh, and the only thing was, I don't know how to explain it. Say, okay, so what's the better thing to do? Right? So, how do I solve the problem? First, let's solve the problem to say, how do I solve the problem? How do I get the guests out of this problem? How do I get the team out of the problem? And then because I learned a bit of engineering, so I'd ask stupid questions. In the book, I write about asking the engineer. So let me go back. There was a time when things would go wrong in Oberoi Towers. Every time Rattan Keswani and one shift engineer was on duty. And people would come to the time office and say, today, who's the duty manager? Who's the shift engineer? Today, something will go wrong. It was that kind of a reputation. It's terrible. I mean, even the VP at that time used to say, Rathan, what's happened? What happens when you're around? Why do these things follow you? The problem was whenever these things followed me, I couldn't get in touch with people who were supposed to be the decision makers because either they were not available or they pretended not to be available. So you kind of took some decisions on the fly and you said, what's the right thing to do? So when I talk about the knifing, one boy stabbed another boy with a wedge knife in the bar, at what the bar used to be called Lancer's Bar at that time. And he was spewing blood like it's tomato ketchup. So I'd done Boy Scouts, so tourniquets, and so tourniquet and wheelchair and get him out, get him to the hospital. First choice, right? Get him out. Okay? And don't get him to the lobby, take him out from the back because guests will get upset. So this is how the thinking was working. And you got to inform the cops. Now, what do you tell the cops? What is the wakalatnama? They're asking you questions. Should you answer the questions because that might lead into, your systems were not intelligent or something went wrong? And the hospital calls up to say, we have to, you have to operate on this. And we need, at that time, 4,500 rupees. I've mentioned the exact amount in the book. Uh, uh, you're not supposed to take an IOU, that little slip to say, you're taking a short-term advance on the front office cashier, not for this kind of purpose. I couldn't reach anybody. And 4,500 or whatever, 5,000 or 10,000, whatever the money was, had to reach the hospital because otherwise the hospital wasn't going to operate on the person. So I took a personal IOU. And I assisted when the auditors asked me, saying, why? You're not authorized to do it. So because the guy is going to die. His family is, a simple family, not a very rich family. His mother was on a wheelchair. His sister was differently able. So, if you look at the background, I mean, what am I supposed to do? Said, if we disagree with your decision, do you realize it would mean a disciplinary action? And the fact that this has to be paid by you. My salary was what, 1,900 rupees. So I said, okay, if that be it, then so be it. Because I couldn't have done anything better or I couldn't have done anything different. What's happened is because, the teams in Mumbai, till very recently, I think a year and a half after I left, is when the P2Ps and the VRSs happened. A lot of them were also union members at that time. They remembered this young 22-year-old who had a team member and took that risk. They remember that. So when I went in as the EVP there was union troubles, and everybody knows about them, multiple union, multiple trouble. They had a sense of respect because I treated them and gave them self-respect. And they remembered those instances. So that kind of set me up easier to be able to deal with them non-subjectively. But it's happened. So the only thing was, okay, what's the better thing to do? I've dealt with, a senior bell captain whose name was Michael at the bell desk, and we had some issues. And I used to go to him and say, Michael, what do you suggest? He'd been doing that job at the bell desk and seeing all kinds of things for over 30 years. And Michael said, let me suggest, why don't you do this? Because it's better. And I'll help you with it. And so Michael was my support, not because some of the seniors were around. And it was a great learning, but also to say there's so much of experience and knowledge behind them. You just need to draw it in and they'll help you. So as long as you've got that little linkage with them of fairness and they have confidence saying you won't shoot and scoot and, leave them hold the bag. Yeah, so that's really what helped. Each time that's what helped, including 2611. So.
Okay, well, so you've really, I guess, in a way, pretty much addressed, which would have been my follow-through question as to leaders struggle, but you bring everybody into your struggle and you struggle with them, and that's what makes it easier for you.
Not too sure it's easier.
It's all relative. It's all relative.
Each of them was a learning experience, but yeah, I mean, left some scars as well because of the aftermath or whatever. But also, in each time, so I write about in the book too. I said, why do people do what they do in these circumstances? They are not hired for that.
Yeah.
They can easily move away at that time and go into a safe zone. But what is it that drives them to stay with you and stay with the company and stay with the guest and work through the whole problem, even at sometimes personal risk? And I still haven't got the answer. Is it the Indianness in us and the pride saying, whatever be my place of work and whatever be, but this is my home. I spend a lot of time here. Whether they treat me well or I think they should be treating me better. That's beside the point. At that time, this is my home. This is my family. The guests are my responsibility. I want to do my best.
Yeah.
I have never understood what makes that happen. I've spoken to many people around all these things and, post the attack and even after that. I've never really got a fair answer. So the only answer I've got is maybe some parts of the culture, not all of it, some part of the culture gets so steeped in that there's almost a nationalistic pride of your home, of your team, like in the army. The Subedar Major is the driver, right? And everybody respects the person. So hospitality, I've seen that happening. I saw that in Delhi. I saw that in Mumbai, Sri Lanka, Saudi Arabia. Any of Saudi Arabia, we went when the war was about to finish, but it was still going on. And you had the scuds flying all over you, behind you, front of you, here in the thuds. But the team was there, and they were a multinational team. Nobody ran out. They finally moved out only when they knew that the gas was safe. Didn't have to. They were from Philippines to Lebanon to Egypt to India to wherever, right? So somehow I think maybe just the sheer culture of hospitality in general that makes them feel pride in a different manner. The only answer I can get, and
Yeah,
very
no,
very different. Very
it's
different. Just
incredible. I mean,
can't put a finger to the sentiment, but it happens, and
yeah.
it creates magic. Same thing happened. If, I mean, people I know about 2611 from the Pride and the Oberoi. Similar, if not more, happened at the Taj hotels across this street. So, and brilliant. Um, Imagine what Karanveer Kang was feeling like standing below when where his family was, the suite was burning in his live sites. Brilliant, but it's something to do with maybe hospitality in itself. That without really teaching you formally, it gets you deep into this true form of hospitality. It's not the Atithi Devo Bhava and all that kind of stuff, but it's a true form of hospitality. As you would treat people at home, you would keep them safe, you would do the right thing for them. I don't know how it causes it, but it does, regardless of good or bad training.
Wow. Uh, I had never thought of it that way, but that is really, really, I think it touches my heart. So thank you for that.